They did it! Ah, they did it! Oh my God, they finally did it! Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of Man in the High Castle Season 3 review. In this episode we are reviewing episode 5, and I want to point out full spoilers. Obviously we've been spoiling the TV episodes, but I've been avoiding spoiling what happens in the book because I am aware that there are people who watch the TV show who have never read the book. However, in this episode, because it's very relevant to what happened in the plot of episode 5, I will be spoiling things from the book. So I'll say it again before I spoil things from the book, so you're safe now. If you haven't read the book and you still would like to at some point and you want to do it without, you would like to be surprised in case there's anything different in the book as compared to the TV show. But there will be a certain point in the episode when I get to discussing major event in the episode, I will also spoil the book. I'll let you know when that happens. Okay, so episode 5. Whoa, that was a surprise, wasn't it? Title of the episode, The New Colossus, and it reviewed a score on IMDb of 9.0, which up to this episode, season 3, episode 5, was the third highest overall on IMDb and the highest rated for the season 3. Now, I haven't seen episodes 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. I'm watching them in order, and I haven't seen the whole season. So up to this point, I've only seen episode 5. Please, anyone who comments, don't spoil anything that happens after episode 5. I'm watching each episode and then recording a video, so the rest of the season is still a surprise to me. But I point all that out because there may be episodes later which have a higher score for the season. Episode 10, for instance. The title of the episode, The New Colossus, it comes from the title of the poem that's at the base of the Statue of Liberty. The poem written by Emma Lazarus, just like the man who rose from the dead. And I thought it would be relevant to read half of the poem. If I remember right, it's a Petrarchian sonnet, so I think like 14 lines, 12, 14 lines. And the most quoted line comes from the second half. So just to refresh the memory of anyone who has heard these lines before, or anyone who perhaps is watching the video that's not a citizen of America and is not so familiar with the poem that's at the base of the statue, I thought I would read the second half of the poem. So please bear with my delivery of the lines. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. And it's relevant because of the plot. The year 0 calls for the destruction of the history of America and the destruction of the icons of America. In episode 4, we saw them taking apart, I believe it was the Lincoln from the Lincoln Monument, or Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. And we saw his head just resting on the ground, kind of reminiscent to the scenes of ISIS destroying the ancient city. Oh, the name is going to escape me, but similar to ISIS tearing apart the statues in the Middle East, in the Levant area. But in any event, their plan now is to destroy the Statue of Liberty. Not only because it's a symbol of freedom of America, but also, just like the poem says, it's a symbol of openness to all kinds of people, whether they be at the height of their situation in life or whether they be the lowest of the low. America will be welcoming to all. But for the Reich, that is contrary to their belief. They believe in the strong and the healthy, and the people who are born from a certain breed, the Aryan race. So the title of the episode is very relevant to not just the events in the episode, but the politics of today, more or less. Let's go over the plot description. Again, as always, this description comes from Amazon. As the Reichsfuhrer continues to provoke the Japanese Pacific states, Juliana barely escapes a deadly situation and discovers a trove of Nazi secrets. Boy, that's a really vague description, isn't it? It's good. I like it because you read that and if you haven't seen the episode, it's not going to spoil what happens, but that's a euphemism for deadly confrontation with another character. Continuing. John Smith tangles with his political adversary. The Nazis prepare for year zero. Joe and Juliana come to a turning point in their relationship. And again, that's another fine euphemism, turning point. But that's all to be discussed later on. Episode 3 was directed by Daniel Percival, who's also one of the producers. I'm not sure if he's like associate producer or executive producer. I believe executive producer. I'm not quite sure how the roles are in Hollywood, but I believe associate producer has less influence than executive producer. I could be wrong about that. In any event, though, Daniel Percival is definitely one of the more influential creatives on the show. He's been involved with the show at least 2 seasons, if not including season 1, and I've seen him on interviews when they do the rounds at the comic conventions. He's one of the creatives along with Isa. I'm not sure if you pronounce her name, Isa or Isa Dick Howard, the daughter of Philip K. Dick. Those are 2 of the people that they include with the actors when they do interviews for the show. So he is definitely one of the main motivators and influencers behind the scenes. And the writer was Wesley Strick. And it's of note, these 2 people, Daniel Percival and Wesley Strick, they do 3 episodes for season 3. They did the first episode, the 5th episode, and the last. And earlier I made mention of the fact that up to this point, Episode 5 had, had the highest rating on IMDb of 9.0, highest rating in season 3. The first episode had one of the higher ratings within the season, like 8.8 or something. But they also these 2 do episode 10, so they're responsible for the opener, the mid-season finale, and the season finale. And their first 2 episodes got among the highest ratings in the season to this date. So I have a feeling their last episode may also be highly among the highest rated. Boy, I'm having difficulty with adjectives, adverbs. Episode 5, the mid-season finale. I don't remember that season 1 had a mid-season finale. Perhaps it did when they had the confrontation in the neutral zone with the bounty hunter. Excuse me. Let me get a drink of water. So they may have, but they definitely did season 2. And at this point, I wanted to kind of remark upon mid-season finales, because it's kind of like a more recent phenomenon. If you go back 20 years, TV shows didn't have mid-season finales, partly because continuity is more of a new thing for TV. There were some shows, what they called the quality television. It was the programming that you saw on NBC that was, I believe, spearheaded by Art Tinker. Again, I'm trying to draw from my memory. I could be incorrect, but on NBC, those shows were St. Elsewhere and Hill Street Blues, and those had continuity. But before then, most shows did not have continuity. They were They were bubble episodes. Is that Highland episodes, bubble episodes, bottle episodes? What happened in one episode didn't influence another. But with the development of continuity, then there was the problem of what do you do between Christmas, over the Christmas season when ratings dropped. So series would end around November-ish and then go on hiatus until after the new year, mid-January. How do you get viewers hooked so that they're eager and anticipating the series returning? And the solution for that was a mid-season finale. And on broadcast TV, those seasons were really long, like 22 episodes, 22 episodes. But now with cable television, they have a much shorter season, like 10 episodes, more along the lines of what British TV is. British TV has like seasons of 6 episodes, but the modern convention now is about 10. And if you have a mid-season finale around 5 episodes in, 6 episodes, that begins to resemble what comic books are like. Comic books now, and comic books have had continuity for 40 years, 50 years, going back to like the 1960s. And the development in comic book storytelling, when they began to be collected in graphic novels in the mid-1980s, about the mid to late 1980s, the collecting those serial stories in the graphic novels meant that you would tell arcs of about 5 or 6 issues, because a graphic novel, a collection of serialized stories of the issues, would contain between 5 to 8 issues. Well, five episodes of a 10-episode series, and that's a mid-season finale. 5 or 6 issues collecting one arc in a graphic novel. At that point, the storytelling of comic books and TV, they begin to resemble each other rather closely. There are good things and bad things to mid-season finales, and in a show like Man in the High Castle, there are some real drawbacks because the show is so sprawling, and it's attempting to tell a story in 3 different locations with 3 different cast members, a very large cast. And unfortunately, 1 hour, 50 minutes, 55 minutes is just not enough time. And so I felt now, since we've reached the mid-season finale, and within this episode, they did attempt to give a climax to different threads in each different area of both the greater Nazi Reich, the neutral zone, and the Japanese Pacific states. There's a resolution in each of those areas. I just decided it'd be very prudent to go over each area and discuss whether I felt those plot lines are good, they're effective, what their weaknesses are if they're weak. So beginning with the neutral zone, which I think in all 5 episodes it's been the weakest. It's gotten the least amount of development. New characters have been introduced and not fleshed out. In order to bring in some old characters to this area, there's been a lot of plot contrivance and out of characterization of the characters. So I've had a lot of issues with what's going on in the neutral zone. First, Ed McCarthy and Robert Childen. I got it. I kept saying children up to now. Childen. Boy, what do I say about this? I'm not the only one that's also had complaints about them. I like the fact that they're kind of like a buddy. At the beginning in season 2, they became this comedy buddy duo. I don't mind that. It's not in the book, but I don't mind it. It's fine. However, let's look at Ed McCarthy. DJ Qualls, I think he's great. I really like his acting. And Brendan Brown, I think his character has been really weak. It's just the writing for it's been really weak. But what he does with it is fine. But DJ Qualls can do both comedy and drama. He's great. However, I mean, you can only paper over flaws. You can't completely hide them. And the writers have got him out of character. In season 1, there's a point where Frank has he had thought about assassinating the Japanese prince, And at the last second, when he's looking at a Japanese boy and he thinks about his own nephew that has been killed, he just finds that it's not in him. He can't do it. So he doesn't shoot at the prince, but unfortunately for him, someone else does. So then we get the whole plot about the Gymnopedie are looking for Frank because they are under this. They want to pin the assassination attempt on him. He's trying to hide the gun, and so Ed takes it upon himself to destroy the gun at their shop. And as he comes up to the kiln to drop the gun in, the Gymnopedie are coming, and he gets nervous and drops it. That's season 1. Ed can't pull it off. He bungles it. But then in season 3, he's got the foresight and the calmness to hide the belt buckle that I discussed last episode from the Duke, from John Wayne. Like he's competent enough and clever enough to hide it, and he doesn't get nervous when the gang members are there and give away the fact he's hiding it. So that, he can whip it out. Hey, we're okay. I found it. I hid this. We can sell it. Take it back to the neutral zone in Denver and sell it, and everything will be fine. So contrived. He's out of character. It's a Deus Machina, literally Deus Machina. This plot thing out of nowhere to save these two, and them just wandering around like it's so flabby. What are you doing with these guys? I get the sense they're going to develop Robert Chilton. He's just too one note. You present someone like that as their characters being so rigid when you're going to develop them later, but we've had to deal with him being only about money for 2.5 seasons. The writers missed. I don't want to spoil something in the book. Okay, I'm not going to spoil something in the book. But in season 1, they took a fundamentally different approach to Robert Chilton that Dick did not. Dick gave him a moment of revelation. There was because they didn't follow in the TV show. It's a fundamental difference between not just the character but kind of the world that they took in season 1. They changed it, which I disagree with. But in any event, I'm looking for that. I'm looking for that in the second half of this season. I'm looking for a moment where they're going to finally grow Robert Chilton's character, because they haven't done it yet and they kind of wasted our time. And these two characters, like in each episode we get maybe 1, 2, 3 scenes of the neutral zone. I went through, I looked, I took a tally, like in episode 5 they list like mid-20s the number of scenes that occur, and the number that happen in Germany are over 10. They're around 10. The number that happened in the Japanese Pacific states are 4 in this episode and 3 in the neutral zone. And of those 3, 1 is for Chilton and McCarthy, and you're using 1/3 of your 3 scenes in this area for a plot that's just been meandering. Such weak writing. Frank and Michael Gaston. And first let me say, I know people on Reddit, they like to call out this character, Frank, and I agree. I think they've ruined the character, starting in season 1. 2 of the characters I feel that they really they took a different approach from, and then Frank's case I think ruined from the book, where Ed McCarthy and Frank. In the Frank, it's about the killing of his sister, niece, and nephew. I can spoil it. It's not in the book, and it changes the character. I kind of like what they're doing with him, but they're just not giving enough time. They're not developing Sabra at all. We just were introduced into it in episode 4, I believe, not episode 3. We have no feeling for any of the other characters. We have only one other character that's spoken apart from the priest, and that's Lila Jacobs. And then, so to give us a climax, to talk about out of character again, in the episode where, I believe it's episode 4, the outsider comes in and threatens to kill the priest because he's Jewish. And so all the people of Sabra say, shoot me then because I'm Jewish. Like, they all stand up. They're all willing to sacrifice themselves for the life of one. Then all of a sudden, when Gymnopedie comes sniffing around for Frank, half just under half of the community are willing to sacrifice Frank for this, completely changing their mind. You can have both, but you need to develop it. You need to show us that in this first plot point, the community stood together. And then at some point, something deteriorated within their ideals, and they became frightened of that. We need that scene. But we haven't got it because we're wasting time showing the death of I've written it down. I'll get it. Hang with me. George Lincoln Rockwell. It's fun. In this episode, it's fun. It's fun watching him get killed. But, it's contrived. It just reminds us of Game of Thrones. The Lannisters send their regards. It's almost the same. John Smith says hello. It's almost the same. And we don't need it. We don't need it. Take that away. Give us more about Sabra. Show us the scene. There is a scene when Frank comes in for the Jewish. He's training for the Jewish coming of age. I should have written down. I assumed I would just remember the name of it, but it says coming of age, a Jewish coming of age, and they're studying Leviticus as part of it. And Frank has had a scene before with Lila we don't see, and that's the golden rule: show, don't tell. Don't tell us what happened. Show us where. And I've written it down. Was it episode 4? Failure. I wrote it down. I can't find it. All right. He says, Lila, when were you going to tell me about the Kempetai asking about me? Lila told me about it. That's the scene we need to see. We need to see Frank with Lila and another member of the community. And Lila reveals that Kempetai are asking for Frank. And then in the dialogue between Lila and Frank and this other member, we can see tension is created with the knowledge that the Kempetai now are looking for Frank. Then when we get to the scene where Frank is late for studying with Michael, and the reason he's late is he's having doubts about his belonging within the community. That seed has been planted. And then when we get to the scene where the community vote on whether Frank should stay or leave, we already know the community's in doubt, that there are people who fear that keeping Frank with them will be the destruction of the community. And even that would not be enough, because we still need to care more about the community. We were just introduced to them the episode before. We only really know one other character apart from Michael, and that's Lila. And she said jack all. She hasn't said hardly anything. And when it comes to the scene of Frank, whether he's going to leave or stay, our feelings are nil. We have nothing invested, except for the fact that we know that this is the seed of democracy. This is something we should be rooting for as viewers, because this will be the future of America. This is where what will replace the greater Nazi Reich and the Japanese Pacific states. That is beginning here in Sabra. So that importance is not being represented within the screen time it's getting. Instead, we're getting all this stuff about the Nazi injury, which is interesting. It's fascinating. But at a certain point, you have to make, as a showrunner, you have to make a decision about what's going to be important within the series. Is it represented within the screen time? The amount of resources you're investing in writing it and in producing it, and how much time the viewers are going to watch. And I think that the neutral zone has just been totally not given enough time and care up to now. Okay, time for a little drink of water, and then we'll move on to discussing the events of the Great Nazi Reich. Great Nazi Reich. This, I feel, is handled much better. In the acting and in the production value and in the direction, all that, it's fine. My other issues are just too much time is spent, but some wonderful things happen this episode with that plot. It's given a nice climax. before I forget, so John Smith, Rufus Sewell, Helen Smith, Chayla Horsdal, and I'll talk more about her performance later. It's really good. George Lincoln Rockwell, David Furr, and J. Edgar Hoover, William Forsythe. We loved William Forsythe. Okay, oh yeah, so I made a note. Amazon lists 20 story chapters. There are more scenes, but I don't have access to the shooting script, so I don't know like how many scenes are listed within the script. But within the story chapters that you can access in Amazon, there are 20 that are listed. 9 of those are about the Great Nazi Reich and John Smith. There are others about the Great Nazi Reich, but 9 of them are specifically related to the John Smith plot. That's almost half. 4 are about the Japanese Pacific states, and 2 of those are about Joe and Juliana. So Tagome, you know, Tagome and Kido, get the short shift. Short shrift. Shrift or shift? Shrift. Not enough. And then 3 are the neutral zone, and 4 are other things. And among those are included Kido and Thelma. Thelma and the character that's with her. I can never remember her name. But let's move on. Okay, so in the Great Nazi Reich storyline, well-developed characters, well-developed supporting characters. For all the time they're spending, almost half of the series, or at least this episode, they better have some well-developed characters. We get contradictory motivations. John Smith and Helen are a case study in that, because they're trying to do good for their family, but then bad for other people. Those are contradictory drives, both the good and the bad within one. We get subtext. The look that J. Edgar Hoover gives when Helen tries to explain how the button with the blood got there. So he says one thing, but he gives another look. That's subtext. They call that when you don't give subtext, when you're indicating, when you're completely playing the subtext as the overtext, and that's something they don't like in acting because it looks really wooden. Right, so I talked about removing the death of George Lincoln Rockwell. As fun as it was, you could use that for other storylines. So many in the series that could have used that airtime. And the most important part of that scene anyway, George Lincoln Rockwell is just like a stooge. He's just a mid-season boss. He's there to provide opposition to John Smith, to help develop the plot of John Smith's role within the Reich. So seeing him die is not as important as seeing John Smith's reaction to his death. I would have removed that scene, and then just before the scene where John Smith learns about the Nazi plan, the Year Zero plan to destroy the Statue of Liberty, have it just before he walks into there, someone pull him aside and whisper, George Lincoln Rockwell is dead, and then show the look on his face. See a look of relief, and then have him walk into the meeting. Because that is his moment of triumph. John Smith has avoided all the dangers, all the pitfalls that were around him. He's provided safety for his family. Have him go into the meeting and then have him see the destruction of Statue of Liberty and the 2 children, the boy and the girl, that are going to be placed instead of the Statue of Liberty, and have him realize that it's all been useless because it's a hollow victory for him. He's trying to provide for his family, but within the Great Nazi Reich, it's pointless. There is no final victory because everything he has can be taken away. Himmler can kill his wife because she's a hindrance. The memory of his children can be corrupted and perverted by the propaganda of the Nazi Reich. Everything he does can be taken away. So he can go from the moment of triumph to the moment of defeat. Yeah, and he can do it within a minute or two. That would be better use of the time rather than watching the death of Rockwell. And I enjoyed it. It was fun. I loved it. Don't get me wrong. Just looking at as a whole, that time could be used for other things. Japanese Pacific states. How do I feel about where they stand, the development of the stories and how the characters are portrayed? Better than the neutral zone, but I have issues. We were given the idea that there was going to be a conflict between the two arms of the military, 2 of the arms of the Japanese military, the Navy and the Army. We were given that with the first episode of season 5, and then nothing. Didn't see it again. It has not been developed. It's been touched upon, the fact that the Navy wants to take a softer touch. They want to win the soft war, the soft propaganda war, and that the Army is opposed to that, but we haven't seen that in conflict. We just seen that there's a couple scenes where you do see the military trying to take a softer line, but it has not been developed. I have a feeling it'll be touched upon. That'll be the second half, one of the major themes, I hope, of the second half, but at this point, undeveloped. What about the Japanese hierarchy? We spent all of season 2, oh, okay, no, that's an exaggeration. In season 2, we got to see behind the scenes in Berlin. We got to see some of the people pulling the strings. What about in Japan? We saw the Japanese prince and princess in season 1, but we didn't get to see much of the intrigue behind them. We get to see Army and Navy a little bit, but we haven't seen who they're answering to. It would be really nice to see that, have that fleshed out. Joe Blake and Juliana, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the big thing now, the big event. So, in the book, the ending is similar, and Juliana kills Joe, and I've been not talking about that. I didn't want to spoil it, but that was the big thing. When they introduced Joe Cinedella, did that mean, is it Cinedella, Cinedella? I believe it's Cinedella. Were they going to kill? Were they going to kill Joe? Was Juliana going to kill Joe? And she did. And the scene was pretty close, but they did have one fundamental difference between the TV show and the book. And okay, so spoiler. Remember I said I was going to spoil something from the book in the TV show. I was going to let you know in case you hadn't read the book, but you still would like to. This is it. Say, maybe go ahead for like 4 minutes. Oh, what am I looking at? My clock is over here. That was real bad. It's like looking in your hand. Well, I got to get going. Running out of time. Okay, maybe fast forward. No, I'm going to read something from the book. It'll take 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to read. It's about a page from the book, and then discuss how the book now is different from the TV show. Maybe in the next couple episodes, the TV show will come closer. But there's a very important development in the book with Juliana's character that they didn't do in the book, in the TV show. Philip K. Dick, Man in the High Castle, page 213. Houghton Mifflin Harcourt from the Kindle edition. I do not have the rights to this, but I'm going to claim fair copy. I'm using it for criticism and review purposes. May I go to the bathroom again? This is Juliana speaking. He nodded, his face working, barely hearing her. So she returned to the bathroom. Again, she shut the door. In the cabinet, another blade, which she took in her right hand. She came out once more. "Bye-bye," she said. As she opened the corridor door, he exclaimed, grabbed wildly at her. "Whisk!" "It is awful," she said. "They violate. I ought to know." Ready for purse snatcher. The various night prowlers. I can certainly handle. This is an interior monologue, just to make that clear. Where had this one gone? Slapping his neck, doing a dance. "Let me by," she said. "Don't bar my way unless you want a lesson. However, only women." Holding the blade up, she went on, opening the door. Joe sat on the floor, hands pressed to the side of his throat. Sunburn posture. "Goodbye," she said, and shut the door behind her. The warm, carpeted corridor. The main difference there is Juliana is going a little crazy. And the reason that Joe gives Juliana leeway to go into the restroom in the book is that he's already aware. She's already been going a little crazy. With the threat of Joe using her to get at the man in the high castle. In the book, Joe is using her to get to the man in the high castle so that he can assassinate the man in the high castle, Evanson. And when Juliana becomes aware of that, she starts to go crazy. Joe notices that she's going crazy and cancels going to the man in high castle's apartment hoping that she'll kind of straighten out. So when she has to go to the restroom, Joe is caught off guard. He doesn't think she has enough foresight to get a weapon from the restroom. One criticism I read of the episode on Reddit, and I can see this, is that why would Joe let Juliana go into the restroom? She's obviously she's either going to try to escape or try to get something to hurt him with, a weapon. So why would he do that? Well, in the book, it's because she's gone a little crazy. The stress has unhinged her. And spoiler again, in the book, it's not gratuitous that she goes crazy. I could see there being a complaint that painting her as kind of a weak character at the threat of violence, that she goes a little crazy. But in the book, she's able to gain access to the man in high castle because in her slightly schizophrenic state, she's open enough to talk about having used the I Ching. And because she comments that the I Ching told her she should go to the man in high castle, something a little ludicrous. A sane person would say, I'm coming to you because fortune telling has told me this is what I should do. Juliana's a little nuts at this point. She does that. And actually, it drops the suspicion that Abendson's wife has. And so she invites Juliana to come to meet Abendson because Juliana specifically states the I Ching told her to do this. So it all makes sense. Now I'm going to talk about a very important scene for two scenes for Helen's character and the cinematography behind them. I thought it was one of the best shot sequences within season 3 so far. The director of photography for the episode was James Hawkinson, and I looked it up. James Hawkinson was also the DP for the episode directed by Ernst Dickerson. I believe that was episode 3, where I was talking about how I really loved the framing between Thelma and Nicole Dormer, got her character's name. And I thought it was interesting how he set it up so that the women were only half of the frame, and that the other, he was using white space for the other half. And I saw examples of that again. And also, I'm not sure whose decision it was, because I believe something like this has to be storyboarded out first. So it could happen within consultation between the director of the episode and the cinematographer, but they use a very Hitchcockian approach in the cinematography. And by that, I mean Hitchcock liked to put the viewer within the frame of reference of the protagonist by using the camera and shooting behind the actor playing the protagonist, so that we took the same perspective as the protagonist. So let's say it's Cary Grant in North by Northwest, and Cary Grant's, he's drunk, and James Mason has had his character put into a car. They're going to fake an accident to make it look, fake his death in a car accident to make it look like he was drunk driving. And Cary Grant wakes up, and he's fighting. He's behind the wheel of the car, and at one point he falls out the side, and the camera shows the viewpoint of the car that we see from Cary Grant. It's to make us feel more tense, because now we feel like we are that character. Well, in this episode, they use that idea of using the perspective of the camera to involve the viewer in the tension of the character, to, in this case, to help us empathize or sympathize for a kind of villainous character. You know, John Smith and Helen, they're not good characters. They're doing bad things. And in this episode, J. Edgar Hoover is on to Helen, and he's going to peg the death of the doctor's wife on Helen. So he comes to the apartment, the Smith's apartment, and when he comes in, a lot of the shots of Helen and J. Edgar Hoover take the framing of Helen's shoulder, so that we are viewing Hoover the same way that Helen is viewing her. I'm trying to... There we go. So you see, Helen is on the left, and the camera is from over her shoulder, and we see Hoover, and we're looking at Hoover similar to the way that Helen is looking at him, so that we are identifying more with Helen than with J. Edgar Hoover. And I have an example of the shot from Hoover's perspective, but we don't... Let's see if I can get there. Yes. So now we're viewing Helen from the counter shot, that is from the perspective that Hoover's viewing her. But we don't see Hoover in the shot. We're much closer to Helen. We're again taking Helen's perspective, so that we view the whole scene from the viewpoint of Helen, not as a detached person, not from Hoover's perspective, but from Helen's perspective. That was something that Hitchcock brought to cinema. And Hitchcock used it for the protagonists. And it was John Carpenter, who was a fan of Hitchcock, who began using it for the killer. So that in Halloween, when Michael Myers, a spoiler for Halloween, when Michael Myers, I can't remember if Michael Myers kills the babysitter or he witnesses a killer kill the babysitter and that turns him bad, but we see the killing of the babysitter at the very beginning of the first Halloween from the viewpoint of the killer. That was the evolution of Hitchcock's technique. Instead of using it for the protagonist, you could use it for the villain. And here we get that. Helen, in this case, didn't kill the doctor's wife premeditatedly. It was not first-degree murder. It was involuntary manslaughter, because the way that the scene is written and filmed, the scene was written and filmed, Helen was just trying to defend herself and accidentally killed the doctor's wife. So we already kind of sympathize for her. Helen was not responsible for the doctor's death. That was John Smith. Helen is complicit. She's complicit with her husband. That's a different degree of guilt, though. So we don't wish her death. And if justice is fair, Helen did not kill the doctor's wife. She is guilty of a cover-up. But we don't want... J. Edgar Hoover is perverting justice to arrest Helen in a political manner. So justice is not clean by any of these participants. They're all bad, different degrees of guilt, of evil. But through the use of the camera and the way that the writers have set up the scene, our sympathies are with Helen. We're with Helen and John. We want to see them get out of this jam. And the cinematographer uses the camera angles to subtly reinforce that, to reinforce that we are watching this unfold from the viewpoint of Helen. And I was really caught by that. There's another sequence with Helen, and that's when she's going over the grief of Thomas. She finally gets to the point where she can let her feelings go. And I thought that scene was notable for a couple reasons. One was technique. I had mentioned before something I learned. Again, I've not directed. I've tried writing theater pieces. I write in my free time, but I've never tried writing a screenplay. So whatever I say just comes from reading about film and watching director's commentary. But I know that actors like to have a longer take with no cuts, because it allows them to get into the scene, to read the reaction of the other actors, to feel the beats, and to really explore the moment. They can pause and play off what the other actor's doing. That's one thing I had known from commentary, from watching films with director's commentary on. I had known that in the past. I learned something new, and that was you can prompt the actor from where you place the camera. You can enhance their performance, prompt their performance from where you place the camera. So the scene where Helen is at the psychiatrist's office, they didn't put the camera on her directly. They shoot a master of her in the office with, you can see the head shrinker, and then they have a camera that's above her head. so that when she's playing the scene on the couch, she does not have a camera facing her. And she said that helped her reach the emotion she needed to. And that was new for me. I had never considered that before, so I learned something. I really appreciated that. And whatever they did worked. She was able to really act in that moment. So that was a very powerful scene within the sequence of the whole great Nazi Reich plot with John Smith. We still have that moment of character development with Helen, of epiphany within Helen. And then a second thing that I really liked about that scene had to do with the composition of the lights and the blacks. For this, I have to use my Kindle again so that I can illustrate. But at the end of the scene with J. Edgar Hoover, look where Helen is. Again, the cinematographer, the DP, James Hawkinson, uses white and dark space really well. I really like the way he uses it. Hold on, I'm trying to get the camera to focus on the Kindle. So Helen is on your right, and we get a lot of white space on our left. That's the very end of the scene when Hoover leaves, and Helen realizes that her life is in jeopardy. Her and John Smith's life, everything they created is all in jeopardy because of the death, the killing, inadvertent killing of the doctor's wife. Look where the DP left Helen at the end of after her epiphany in the psychiatrist's office. Look how he frames her. Give me 1 second to draw that up. There. In black. He puts her, you can do it, camera? Okay, I think I need to focus on Helen. It's focusing on the black. I hope that helps. You can see, there's my clock. You see in the background. Let's move that clock out of there. Okay. So this is her in the apartment after the scene where she cries in the psychiatrist's office. And he puts Helen on the left and black on the right. And then when Hoover leaves, she's on the right and white's on the left. So the DP, the cinematographer, is reinforcing that things have changed for Helen, both from the start of the scene to the end, by changing the color palette from black to white and from putting her on the opposite end of the camera frame, from left to right. Something that your eye will see, and you'll feel the difference. At the end of the scene, you know she's in jeopardy. You know she's contemplating that, but you can also feel that something is different, and that's been set up by what the work the DP has done at the start of the sequence, by the way he's framed her, and then the lighting composition, which is masterful. It's masterful. Finally, in case you missed it, not so much in this episode. There was a scene where George Lincoln Rockwell opens a newspaper. And in the first episode, I did get some interesting tidbits about the world from that. But unfortunately, the way the camera was positioned, the print was too small. I couldn't read what they put on a newspaper. But there was one, in case you missed it, and that was about the music. And there is, in the Cuba sequence, there's a song being played by Dizzy Gillespie. And the show is really good. Whenever they go outside the Japanese Pacific states or the great Nazi Reich, they introduce things that they try to reinforce the idea that it's a different space. The things that have been repressed, the homosexuality, race, culture, those things can be found. So the composers of the song playing in the background in Cuba, when we see George Lincoln Rockwell at the kind of cabaret restaurant, is the song Jungla by Dizzy Gillespie from the album Afro, which was released in 1954. The song and many of the songs on that album were co-written with the Cuban composer Chico O'Farrill, and Dizzy Gillespie was an African-American jazz performer, someone who would have been banned from the great Nazi Reich. So the fact that they have his music, and I imagine Cuban music would have been banned too. Yeah, I don't think the Nazis would have, Latins Latins would have been out, not pure blood. So that song would not have been played at all. But my one question I had was, when I realized that it's 1954 and the Germans won the war, so how did this song get composed in 1954? What's the backstory of Dizzy Gillespie somehow making his way to Cuba and then composing music in Cuba, or making his way to the neutral zone where he can compose music without fear of being killed by the right? Just how did Dizzy Gillespie live in this world for the additional 8 years it would have taken for him to correspond to the war ended in 45. The song is composed in 54. About 9 years. Somehow he lived in the world for 9 years before making this song. What's the backstory there? Anyways, I thought that was something that would be worthwhile to point out. But that's all I have for this episode. So I hope you enjoyed it, learned something new, and I will see you soon, I hope. Please join me again in the future. Take care and be well.